welcome to lesson 1.1, Myth-Busting Partnerships. Now, there are some needs to know about partnerships, and we're going to dive into them straight away. And the goal of this lesson is to help you understand the realities of successful partnerships. It's important because most partnerships fail due to avoidable issues. And we're going to get practical by learning the common myths versus the realities and starting to set up your partnership operating system. So let's talk about the core partnerships reality. And that is that most people expect that partnerships are going to drive instant success. And that's rarely true. Unlike a transaction where you can buy something and you get something straight away, partnerships usually, when structured well and where intention is aligned, drive compound value over time. And so what ends up happening is that partnerships do take time. They take effort and they take alignment. And that's actually a lot of fun when you think about the value you can derive from partnerships. The key takeaway here is that partnerships require true strategic planning, where you're looking over multiple years. They require communication and the navigation to see them go through the ups and downs. In this case, enthusiasm is just not going to cut it. So let's talk about headspace in a case study that will help illustrate just how powerful partnerships can be to an organization. Now, if you prefer to listen to this as a podcast episode, you can scan this QR code and get instant access to that right now. Headspace is a mindfulness powerhouse, and how it grew will surprise you. In fact, the strategic partnerships that Headspace went through had a dramatic impact on their growth profile. It wasn't the number of partnerships necessarily, it was the type of partnerships that were really impressive. And there were three. So the first one of those was Headspace building a team to go out to a number of workplaces and sharing with them the role that being mindful and meditation can play in helping to reduce risk of burnout and overwhelm in workplaces. That was hugely effective, where they were able to generate over 2,700 partnerships to drive that message home. They then moved to a very different forum, into Netflix, and they created an interactive mindfulness experience, which took mindfulness out of an app, out of a service, and put it onto the big screen. Then they went, and this is one of my favorites, they went into healthcare, where they're able to demonstrate that the use of Headspace could sit alongside other clinical tools for people who are suffering of burnout, anxiety, and depression. And through all of that tool set across each of those different verticals was able to scale internationally. So it's not just about the number of partnerships, it's about the type of partnerships that can be used. We dive into a lot more detail of this case study in that podcast episode, so feel free to scan that QR code now. All right, let's talk about the rule of 6. There are 6 core truths, 6 benefits, and 6 factors to avoid when we think about partnerships. So let's talk about the 6 truths. Partnerships are not quick fixes. They require long-term thinking. Not every partnership is a good partnership, and we're going to share how you can go about assessing which ones are ideal for your organization. But the core message here is choose carefully. A clear structure equals a clear foundation. Define intent and expectations early, and by doing that, it's going to avoid a whole range of downstream issues in the years to come. Great partnerships evolve. Every partnership goes through a different phase depending on how quickly it's moving and a whole range of other conditions. You should expect it to change because there is no linear path when it comes to partnerships. The best partnerships survive and evolve because both parties really want to see the outcomes that were originally promised when the partnership was being formed. Number 5, partnership managers are stewards. They're not owners. So you might be in an organization where there are partner managers or partnership managers that are there to manage the day-to-day of the relationship. They are super important. But remember, the people who are involved mostly on decisions relating to whether the partnership will continue, expand, or ultimately be wound back are the people who are the owners of those partnerships. It's very important, not all the time, but it's important to make sure that you have the owners at the table regularly so they can understand exactly what's going on at a partnership over time. And number 6, partnerships aren't forever. Winding up a partnership which is no longer fit for purpose is very, very important. What's even more important is winding it up with dignity, because no one should ever be made to feel that their time was wasted. There is always value that comes from partnerships. And like I mentioned earlier, there's a good chance that if you've worked with somebody once and it was a great experience, you'll work with them again, even if the outcome was not what you would both hope for. All right, so let's talk about the 6 benefits that live inside a partnership. Well, the first one might be very obvious: growth and revenue expansion. We all want to make sure that we have more income coming into our businesses. That is one of the key benefits. The second one is cost efficiency and resource optimization. Sometimes we can find partnerships which allow us to share costs or to make better use of the finite resources that we have. Number 3, it can help us with competitive advantage and differentiation. When you partner with another organization, you might benefit from the halo effect. You might also benefit the other customer acquisition channels that they have or the technology they have. So it can give you a core competitive advantage without you having to rebuild it yourself. Number 4, innovation and capability enhancement. Depending on where you are in your journey as an organization, you will have had a chance to build certain capability in your services, products, and the infrastructure that supports those. By partnering with other organizations, you might be able to accelerate that at a much faster rate than you could do by yourself. It also means that you might be able to do really fantastic product developments that you would never be able to afford on your own. So that's benefit number 4. Number 5, customer experience and retention. When we talk about customer experience, we're talking about everything from the way that a customer understands and learns about you in the first instance, right through to all the points of awareness, the consideration, when they choose to buy, what the experience is like when they onboard, and ultimately when they are upgraded or when they churn off your organization. And there are partners that can help you do magical things all the way through that process. They can also help you retain customers. And the important point around number 5 here is most organizations want to achieve one of 2 things. Number 1 is, let's try and attract more customers to make more money, to be more sustainable and resilient. And the second one is, how can I retain the customers I've already got? So if you're not sure which benefit to be thinking about in terms of the offer that you can make to a future partner, think about in those 2 terms. How can I help a partner acquire more customers or retain the ones they have? And number 6, the strategic flexibility and risk management that partners can bring. When we talk about things like supply chains, there are many moving parts when you're trying to maybe import certain factors of your product or partner with organizations around the world. The reality is that when you move into an ideal partnership, that kind of strategic flexibility helps you to manage risks that otherwise would cause a lot of problems for your business. So when we think about these 6 benefits, revenue growth and expansion, cost efficiency, competitive advantage, innovation and capability enhancement, customer experience and retention, and strategic flexibility, these benefits are ones that you may be seeking for your organization, but they're also ones that you can offer, if you have them to offer, to potential partners. We're going to come back to this diagram a number of times throughout the program, but if you are worried about, well, what could I offer as an organization? Come back to this diagram and think about what are those value points that you could offer to a partner. I would encourage you to start with number 5. It's a great place to open a conversation and then go from there. All right, so let's talk about the 6 factors to avoid in a partnership. And we've mapped these against how we're going to move through our curriculum so you can see where we're going to deal with those. Number 1 is a lack of clear goals and expectations. And that might sound elementary, but the reality is that there is a way to communicate intention and there is a way to get that intention into partnership agreements so everyone can stay on track throughout the lifetime of that partnership. We're going to deal with that in lessons 1.2 and 1.3. Choosing the wrong partners, we want to avoid that at all costs. That's where the ideal partnership framework comes into play, and we'll cover that in lesson 2.1. In lesson 2.3, we're going to talk about how we can manage excellent communication so that we avoid misalignment at all costs. And then we'll start talking about how we deliver our first win, that all-important step that will help the other organization realize that actually we made a great decision partnering with your organization. Then we'll move into scaling. How do we do it in a way which is going to not overwhelm your team and be able to still service the partners that you have there? Because again, it's not about setting and forgetting. We'll deal with that in lesson 3.2. And then we'll get to lesson 3.3, where we want to understand what is our muscle that we're going to build to help end partnerships gracefully so that our reputation stays intact, their reputation stays intact, and when the time arrives again to partner, then the answer to the request to partner is likely to be yes, as opposed to thanks, but no thanks. Okay, so let's go back to the key takeaways of this lesson. Number 1 is that partnerships require strategy, patience, clear alignment, and communication to be successful. Most failures are preventable. I want to say that again. Most partnership failures are preventable and happen due to unclear goals, poor communication, and mismatched expectations. The upside, however, on partnerships is that they can be game changing because they compound in growth. All right, so this is where we move into the first action step. Open up your partnership blueprint to lesson 1, and then use the My Business GPT, which you'll find inside that section of the partnership blueprint, to complete the foundation section, and that will help us up for a great lesson 2. When you're ready, click complete, and I'll see you in lesson 2, which is the day 1 diagnosis, where we can understand where you are today. Thanks for being here. See you in the next lesson.